Almost 5 years ago, the Bharatiya Janata Party, led by Narendra Modi, scored a monumental victory. This is the man who made it happen, running a presidential-style campaign, emphasizing his qualities as a leader over party affiliation. And this is the man who over the last 5 years has been at the helm of affairs, be it the country's foreign affairs or its economy. It is Narendra Damodar Das Modi who has been the face of the Bharatiya Janata Party-led NDA government. Right from financial inclusion to attack on black money to corporate insolvency and the world's biggest experiment in universal healthcare. During his tenure, Narendra Modi has led from the front. What many say are audacious experiments, which his detractors claim are monumental blunders.
See, the Modi government came to power with a lot of promises, and first and foremost was that the government would be substantially different from the previous UPA government in terms of its economic policies. The economy is growing around 7.2%, but we have not been able to grow 8% plus, which is supposed to be a very ideal growth, which will help in the creation of jobs, more jobs for the economy. One feels that the economy does not smell good, on a variety of factors. The kind of, we have had some growth, but it is not turning out into a positive signals, on the ground. So I think economy has been one area where there were promises, but probably the government has lost out on an opportunity to deliver a very robust economy for the country.
अरे सरकार का काम होता है जनता जनार्दन की जिंदगी में बदलाव आए, नौजवान को रोजगार मिले, किसान को मेहनत का पैसा मिले, माँ बेटों को इज्जत और सुरक्षा मिले, ये सरकार का काम होता है। मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूं, जो 60 साल से आप मुसीबतें झेल रहे हैं, 60 साल से जो तकलीफें झेल रहे हैं, उससे मैं आपको मुक्ति दिलाऊंगा। मैं नरेंद्र दामोदर दास मोदी ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूं कि
In May 2014, Narendra Modi-led BJP government came to power on the promise of reinvigorating the manufacturing sector, creating more jobs and overhauling the country's inadequate infrastructure. The government assumed office with the promise of economic growth and development. Fueled by hopes that the BJP government would fast-track reforms and accelerate economic activity, the BSE Sensex created history by surpassing the 25,000 mark. It was the stock market's best performance in 5 years, with a rally of over 6,000 points in 2014, which also saw investors' wealth hitting the Rs 100 trillion level for the first time in history. In percentage terms also, the rally in the 2014 year was the biggest since 2009. However, almost 5 years later, the country's economic growth rates have not been too encouraging. And what led to these numbers were two black swan events in a span of 9 months.
ये काला धन वापस आना चाहिए, ये चोर लुटेरों से एक एक रुपया वापस लेना चाहिए।
On 8th of November 2016, When the world was confused on how to react to the newly elected President of the United States, Donald Trump, Narendra Modi decided to bring all the attention back home. The Prime Minister decided to address the nation all of a sudden and did what nobody ever thought of, even in their wildest dreams.
आज मध्यरात्रि यानी 8 नवंबर 2016 की रात्रि को 12 बजे से वर्तमान में जारी 500 रुपये और 1000 रुपये के करेंसी नोट लीगल टेंडर नहीं रहेंगे.
It felt like a fake viral message when the news of demonetization of 1,000 and 500 currency notes started to spread. But what followed was pandemonium. India all of a sudden was cashless. The country's 86% of the currency in circulation was declared an illegal tender. Banks witnessed a sea of people standing at their doors to change currency, and bankers had no indication of what was coming. 3 sectors in India, agriculture, manufacturing and construction, which run heavily on cash, were posting a healthy growth before November 8th. But after the cash crunch, they were badly hit. The sectors were left with no capital to run their operations and to give salaries to their employees. The daily wage labourers employed in these sectors were left in distress with nothing to earn their living from. What started off as a war against black money and shadow economy soon became a demon for the Aam Aadmi. People were forced to stand in queues for hours to exchange old notes, for which the banking system was seemingly unprepared. However, the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister both continued to support the move, claiming it to be a temporary glitch in formalizing India's economy in the long run.
इसका देश भर में स्वागत हो रहा है. हर सामान्य नागरिक को और ईमानदार आदमी को लगता है कि कम से कम एक निर्णय हिंदुस्तान में हुआ, और शायद पिछले 70 साल में ऐसा निर्णय नहीं होगा, जिसमें उसकी ईमानदारी के ऊपर प्रीमियम रखा गया. और उसको लगता है कि जो भ्रष्ट व्यक्ति थे और व्यवस्था में भी जो कमजोरियां आई थी, उसको परिवर्तित करने का ये निर्णय एक बहुत बड़ा कदम उठाएगा.
मैंने देश के सामने पहले ही दिन कहा था, ये काम बहुत बड़ा है, समय लेने वाला काम है, तकलीफ उठानी पड़ेगी ऐसा काम है, कुछ असुविधा होगी ये भी मैंने कहा था. लेकिन मैं हैरान हूं, मेरे देशवासी तकलीफ झेलने के बाद भी इस काम की सफलता के लिए कष्ट उठा रहे हैं.
But the rosy picture that the government tried to paint soon turned black when in August 2018 the RBI stated that 99.3% of the banned currency had been returned. There were numerous reports of bankers helping people to exchange more than the decided value of cash. The cash deposited in Jan Dhan accounts also saw an unnatural spike during this period. It seemed like Indians had found the jugaad once again to save themselves from Prime Minister Modi's surgical strike. Before demonetization, India's GDP growth had started to fall on the back of issues like slow export growth, rising NPAs in the banks, increasing corporate debts, and slow private investment. And Modi's gutsy move led to a further slump in India's growth. While India was growing at a rate of 9% at one point, the demon of demonetization, coupled with other factors, pulled down the GDP growth rate to 6.1% in the fourth quarter of the fiscal 2016-17. It was the lowest in more than 2 years.
The whole purpose of demonetizing the currency and expecting that some 3.5 lakh crore of the demonetized currency would be extinguished and will not come back into the system, that has been beaten. So we are not sure whether, I mean, that is what experts say, they are not sure that demonetization has indeed been a successful effort compared to the kind of drastic losses that it led to. For instance, there have been huge layoffs in the MSME sector, the micro, small and medium scale sector. There have been huge kind of layoffs in the garments business, in the textile business, in the small businesses. The agriculture area also, segment also suffered to an extent. So compared to the disruption it caused, the benefits has not been so much. So that is also reflecting in the survey which India Today recently did, the Mood of the Nation survey, where a vast majority of people are saying that demonetization has not met its purpose, and black money may have come back into the system as white.
A month after demonetization, it was time for the Modi government to act on another promise it had made to the country. The promise of structural reforms. The non-performing assets or bad loans of the banks had been a lingering issue for India's economic growth since the time of the UPA government. Banks play a significant role in fostering economic growth in the country. They mobilize the financial resources and make them flow into desired channels. This goal cannot be achieved if the banks don't get the profit from the money they lend. So naturally, NPAs are a big issue for the Indian economy. According to RBI data, the total bank gross NPA were 8,40,250 crore rupees in September 2017, more than double of what the UPA handed over to the Modi-led NDA. Prime Minister Modi blamed the erstwhile UPA government for the whopping amount of bad loans. To tackle the NPAs, the NDA government pushed for insolvency and bankruptcy code. Modi's crusade against the NPA started as soon as the code became effective in December 2016. To give the banking sector a boost, the Indian government with the RBI decided to pump in money to the stressed banks.
This will be a reform and recap package and not just a recap package, so as to ensure that this money is used to strengthen public sector bank balance sheets and that we don't sow the seeds of the next boom and bust cycle of lending.
RBI and the Finance Ministry jointly worked on the rupees 2.1 trillion recapitalization package for public sector banks. Some economists hailed the bank recap as a good move, despite concerns over widening fiscal deficit.
He came with the idea of Make in India, but somehow, the kind of growth that we should have got has not translated under his regime. So industry has been another problem. The banking sector has been another problem because the banks are still straddled with huge non-performing assets or bad loans. So because of which they are not able to lend to sectors that really need finance. So that has been a problem. Another area has been the volatility of the rupee. So the rupee had weakened substantially in the last few months. Now it is a little more or less steady, but that has also affected us in a major way. Exports has just now started to pick up, but over the last 4 years or so, we have had a kind of a stagnancy in export, and now we have a slight growth, but it is not actually a big growth that we would have ideally want to have. So all these together has been a drag on the economy.
Honourable members, I'm starting the voting process.
A few months before Narendra Modi's demonetization strike and the bank recapitalization announcement, a bill had been passed in the Rajya Sabha whose impact on Indian economy would be more lasting than the 8th of November announcement. On the 3rd of August 2016, the Rajya Sabha passed the Goods and Services Tax (GST) Constitutional Amendment Bill, which the Lok Sabha had already approved the year before.
Lobby may be clear. Lobbies may be clear.
The GST is a uniform indirect tax levied on goods and services across the country. Like many developed nations, India too was to tax manufacture, sale and consumption of goods using a single comprehensive tax mechanism. After 18 meetings of the GST Council, GST was finally rolled out midnight of July 1st, 2017 at a magnificent launch ceremony. The Parliament was illuminated ahead of the special announcement of what was labelled as the biggest structural reform since India's independence.
Best brains of the country, उन्होंने लगातार इस काम को किया है और उसी का परिणाम है कि आज ये जीएसटी को हम साकार रूप में देख सकते हैं.
The country's economy was waiting for the impact of demonetization to cool off, and it was hoping to do well on the back of a good monsoon. But confusion around the new tax system gave the economy another jolt. Businesses nationwide whittled down production in the April-June quarter and focused on offloading existing stock, thanks to the uncertainty about how the new indirect tax regime would treat earlier tax credits on inputs. Despite the good monsoon, farmers' income still remained poor because companies that usually bought their crops stopped production. World Bank in a report said that India's economic momentum had been affected by disruptions from the withdrawal of banknotes and uncertainties around GST. The GDP growth hit another low in the first fiscal of 2017-18 as it stooped to 5.7%, the lowest in 3 years at that time. Small traders and small businesses were again the targets of poor implementation of GST. The industries which purchased material from the SMEs were importing the material they required to keep up. On the other hand, already sluggish exports that accounted for 20% of the GDP declined further because of slow manufacturing in the domestic market. The RBI governor on 4th of October 2017 accepted that the implementation of GST had adversely affected the Indian economy, but for a short term.
We expressed concern about the loss of momentum of growth in the early months of 2017-18, especially the persisting weakness in manufacturing. The MPC noted that the implementation of the GST appears to have rendered short-term prospects uncertain, possibly delaying the revival of investment activity, which is already hampered by stressed balance sheets of banks and corporations.
Now the problem is that the issue is that we have a GST which is a very watered down GST compared to what was originally put forward. There are still traders who complain about their returns are not coming back to them from the GST. So there are textile traders who are still textile manufacturers, especially in the garments section, who are charged with 15% on yarns, They still feel that it is on the higher side. So they used to be charged 5% earlier. So there are so many problems yet to be tackled under GST. At the same time, the collections from GST has not been as high as expected. For instance, in December 2018, the collections of around 94,000 crore, it should have been much higher. So this is something that the government will need to address in the coming days.
In November 2018, the BJP government released revised GDP numbers, which implied that India's economic growth under the previous Congress-led coalition government was slower than estimated earlier and was never in double digits. What followed was a massive political war of words. Former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram attacked the NDA in a tweet and said that the revised GDP numbers was the result of a hatchet job by Niti Aayog and that the numbers were a joke. But Finance Minister Arun Jaitley defended the move, saying that data had been recalibrated to reflect a more appropriate picture of the economy.
In fact, they said that the new GDP series has conclusively established that we did not mismanage the economy. On the 3rd of February 2015, this statement was categorically made by the former finance minister, welcoming the new series. So what was welcomed by the UPA in 2015 is now being criticized in the year 2018 because it revises it downwards.
When you change the base year, changing the base year is nothing wrong, but when you change the base year to prove that growth in your regime has been better than an old regime, and thereby undermine the kind of growth that has happened in the former regime, may not be a good idea. And it also happens that most of the real indicators of growth, as far as an economy is concerned, be it industrial growth or manufacturing, none of these really reflect the kind of high growth that the government has been claiming. So there are some people who say that these numbers, we need to be very careful when we change the GDP numbers like this, because that can affect our credibility among the international community.
According to the back series data, the Indian economy grew at an average of 6.67% in the 9 years ended 31st of March 2014 when UPA was in power, slower than the 7.35% achieved in the 4 years ended 31st March 2018 with Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister. In December 2018, months ahead of the general elections of 2019, the government had to announce new measures to address the distress that percolated down because of various reasons. The new RBI governor announced norms for small businesses to be relaxed. Following this, the global credit rating agency Moody's Investor Service said that the new steps announced by the government to aid micro, small and medium enterprises and farmers hold the risk of pushing the fiscal deficit to 3.4% of the GDP for 2018-19. For the current fiscal year, the government has its fiscal deficit target set at 3.3% of the GDP. However, in April to November 2018 period alone, the deficit touched 114.8% of the budget estimates. In his election campaign almost 5 years ago, Narendra Modi had promised 10 million jobs annually. But almost 5 years down the line, India seems to be in the throes of an unemployment crisis. While the Modi government refuses to release reports by India's National Sample Survey Office and its Labour Bureau According to Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy, there has been a significant decline in employment. According to CMIE, the unemployment rate rose to a two-year high of 7.4% in December 2018, with nearly 30 million young people looking for jobs. And India needs growth of 8% plus to generate enough jobs for those workers.
We don't have, for instance, a very reliable data as such on jobs, but in general, there is a feeling that, and that the Mood of the Nation poll that India Today has carried out also shows that a lot of people think that the government has failed to create adequate number of jobs. So I think this is an area where the government needs to address, and the kind of feeling we get from sources in the government is that there would be some big announcements, that will come forward. For instance, the railways has already announced the creation of some 2 lakh jobs for the railways. So those kinds of announcements we can expect from the government.